Warning, this podcast contains heavy spoilers for not just one movie, but entire franchises. We highly recommend going and watching these movies before listening to us as a companion piece that stitches all the timelines into one creepy, crime-ridden story. There will be no more spoiler warnings. We do not break character. After this, there is no turning back. You've been warned. Hit the music.
You are talking about the nonsensical ravings of a lunatic mind.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's
alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello, freaks and fiends, and welcome to It's Alive podcast. This is a true crime, paranormal, interstellar podcast covering unbelievable stories that sound like they were ripped straight from the pages of a Hollywood script. I'm your host, the outlaw Dr. H. George Smokenstein, THC, and with me as always is my very own scream queen, the perfect combination of beauty and brains, the bride of Smokenstein, the India heart, the expert, the guts and gore, the gorgeous, the sexy Amy Rose.
Hi.
So, we're getting back. We're in now part 4.
Part 4.
Part 4. The Sawyer Family and the Legend of Leatherface. Part 4. The Saw is Family. So this is a longer script than usual. So fuck all the fluff at the start. Let's get fucking cracking and kick the shit out of this one. Let's go.
So, by the mid-1980s, the public believed the Sawyer story was finished. Drayton Sawyer had been arrested following the collapse of the operation hidden beneath Texas Battleland. Robert Chop Chop Sawyer would soon follow him into custody, later declared criminally insane and locked away in a psychiatric facility. Norbert Nubbin Sawyer had died years earlier, struck by a passing truck on a Texas back road during the infamous Hardesty escape.
I still don't know how they managed to clean up all that blood before the cops got there.
Bleach and a power washer.
A power... Would they have had power washers in the 70s?
Do you want me to Google? Are you
I
that
think
interested? Bleach and a deck scrub, Josh. Fuck the power
it's the
washer.
least,
a deck
I suppose
scrub.
it's the least of the mysteries in this whole fucking story. So let's just continue.
So to the outside world, that was the end of the cannibal clan. But the Sawyers were never a single man or even a single house. They were a family. And while Drayton's branch of the family had spent the years after the Hardesty incident building an underground criminal enterprise that stretched from Newt County to San Antonio and eventually Dallas, another branch of the family had been somewhere else entirely.
See, that's the thing about the Sawyers, right? People like to imagine monsters as lone wolves. One crazy man with a chainsaw, one psychopath living in a house full of bones. But families don't work that way, and neither do bloodlines. While Drayton was perfecting the business side of murder, someone else was trying to solve a much bigger issue.
And that someone was Anne Sawyer. Anne was the daughter of Boss Sawyer and Wilhelmina, sister to Drayton, and one of the few members of the clan who possessed both intelligence and patience in equal measure.
She was sister wife too. Well, I don't know if they actually ever got married. I don't think they did the whole marriage thing. They were just
Sister wife is when you
not in
have...
not in the Mormon way,
Very cool.
but in the incest and we had children way.
Sister and wife. Wifey sister.
But not legally binding wife. She was the matriarch of the family. He became the patriarch of the family once Earl and then Boss were out of the picture.
Okay, yes, yeah. So when faced with the harsh reality of their bloodline problems, along with financial difficulties, it was Anne who made the decision to take the majority of the clan and explore other avenues for succession. She left Newt County with Alfredo Sawyer, Richard Tinker Sawyer, Edward Tex Sawyer, William Earl Sawyer, and Vilmer Sawyer. And eventually, though the family didn't know it yet, their most infamous member would return to them as well, Jedediah Sawyer, better known to the world as Bubba or Leatherface.
But Anne didn't leave because she was scared. She left because she could see something the rest of the family couldn't. The Sawyers had a future problem and a big one.
Yeah. Years earlier, Anne made the decision that would shape the future of the entire clan. She refused to become another Wilhelmina. Wilhelmina Sawyer had spent her life giving birth to children inside an isolated family that believed blood should remain within the bloodline, and saw what that life had done to her mother. The endless pregnancies, the brutality, the expectation that her only value was producing the next generation of Sawyers. So Anne made sure that would never be her fate.
She'd have never met it in Ireland in that time period.
No. She removed the possibility entirely. Through crude surgery and sheer determination, Anne ended her ability to bear children. Ouch.
Which sounds like a victory for her until you realise what that meant for the rest of the family.
Yeah. The Sawyer clan was now a family of men. Boss Sawyer was gone, Wilhelmina was dead, and the surviving members of the bloodline were all male. Drayton has gone his own way, Robert was overseas in the army, and Norbert was already drifting toward the kind of violence that would eventually expose them all. Anne looked around at the boys growing up under her watch and realised something terrifying. The Sawyers had no future, no daughters, no mothers, no way to extend the bloodline, and for a family that believed its traditions were sacred, extinction was not an option.
You can kill a lot of people and still survive. You can rob graves. You can butcher travelers. You can even get away with a chainsaw massacre if you're careful enough.
Mm-hmm.
But if your bloodline dies with you, that's the one thing the Sawyers could never allow.
I wouldn't like my bloodline to die with me either.
Well, I don't think anybody would like their bloodline to die with
It's a very
them.
natural thing for you to want to carry your bloodline on, like.
Well, we've done that twice already, so we're good.
Another 10 times are coming.
Yeah. Easy, Jessie Buckley.
Okay, cool.
Take it handy.
She wanted 20,000. I only want 10 more. It's not even as much as my grandmother had, so we're doing fine.
We'll just have a little soccer team.
Yeah.
Fuck off.
So while Drayton spent the next decade turning murder into business, Anne Sawyer was trying to solve a very different problem. How do you build a future for a family that refuses to let the outside world in, when the only way to survive is to bring outsiders inside? For years, the answers eluded them, but eventually the Sawyers would reach a conclusion. And when they did, the solution would be colder and far more brutal than anything the family had done before.
Yeah, this gets a bit fucked up. Right? Well, as we're going to get into and we're going to see, they kind of follow the logic of Bear Sawyer with the Bone Boys on how to reproduce.
So for the next decade, the branch of the Sawyer family led by Anne became ghosts along the back roads of Texas. They didn't stay anywhere long. Abandoned farmhouses, collapsed ranch properties, forgotten stretches of highway where no one asked questions. The family moved constantly, living quietly on the margins of a state that had already begun forgetting the rural communities that once thrived there. Money was scarce, food was unreliable, and unlike Drayton's side of the family, Anne had no stable operation to sustain them.
Yeah. Drayton built business, Anne built survival, two very different strategies for the same problem.
The clan lived the only way they knew how. Roadkill taken from empty highways, drifters and hitchhikers unlucky enough to wander too far from the main roads, occasional work when the opportunity presented itself. But even during those unstable years, Anne kept the family organized. Each member had a role. Alfredo Sawyer, the eldest surviving son of Boss and Wilhelmina, became the family's labourer. He handled the physical work, digging, hauling, disposing of what the family left behind. And later, when the opportunity finally appeared, he would be the one to reopen Drayton's old gas station near Newt County under a new identity. But during these years, Alfredo's usefulness rarely extended beyond muscle.
Well, Alfredo wasn't exactly the brains of the operation. No. Truth be told, the only one slower than Alfredo in this family was Bubba himself.
Yeah. Richard Tinker Sawyer was the opposite. Where Alfredo relied on strength, Tinker relied on planning. He was intelligent, patient, and surprisingly adaptable. Tinker became the one responsible for training the younger generation of Sawyers. He taught them the traditions of the clan, how to stalk prey, how to control victims, how to disappear when the outside world started asking questions. Under Tinker's watch, the boys grew into capable hunters.
Do you know one thing I forgot to mention about Tinker, which is, I suppose,
Go for it.
it's relevant but not relevant. It doesn't come up in the story. It's not used in the story, and I don't know how it happened, but he's missing an arm. He's got a hook for a hand.
He's a Jedi.
Huh?
He's a Jedi.
I don't know any Jedis that have hooks for hands. That's more of a
Oh,
pirate
he's a
thing.
hood for. Oh yeah. Okay. See, I thought. Okay.
What
Yeah.
did you think I said?
I missed the hook. I was just imagining him when you said hook in a Jedi robe.
Well, what Jedi robe?
Because didn't Luke get his hand cut off?
Oh, yeah. I
Are there not
suppose,
multiple Jedis missing an arm?
Well, I mean, Anakin is missing multiple body
Well, yeah, I knew that part.
parts.
A lot of body.
Luke was missing an arm. I can't think of anybody else.
Oh my god!
I mean,
thought there was, like,
C-3PO
2 or
randomly
3.
loses random parts here and there that get replaced. You never see him lose them, but he shows up in different movies with different color body parts as he goes as they
I could
go
have
along.
sworn there was like 2, 3, 5.
Probably is. I just can't fucking think of it. I mean, Darth Maul lost the bottom half of his body, and he's got a
Not
new
an
show coming
arm,
out in a couple
though.
of weeks.
I specifically remember arms. It's going to crack me up. Anyway, Edward Tex Sawyer in particular developed a skill that the family had rarely possessed before, and that was charm. Tex inherited Drayton's charisma and Anne's ability to present a calm, trustworthy face to strangers. He was handsome, confident, and the kind of young man people instinctively trusted.
Which makes him the most dangerous type of Sawyer, because people who don't run from someone they trust, they end up following them. Now, here's a question for you. We got Alfredo, Tinker, and Tex. Fuck, marry, kill. Who we going with? You've seen pictures of all three. There's pictures of them right there on the wall.
Right, okay. Refresh my mind. Which one's Alfredo?
So, Alfredo's actually not in any of the pictures. He is the dude.
Okay, I'll go with the other 2 first, then I'll make up my mind about Alfredo.
I'll put it to you this way: Alfredo is most likely the kill in most people. So fuck, marry, kill in this.
Tex
scenario.
was the charmer.
Tex is the guy with the hook. He's the dude standing behind Anne and Babby, and then on the other side in the ground you have Tex.
Oh, that's easy. Fuck, marry, and yeah, probably kill Alfredo.
So Tex is the marry. Fuck is the Tinker.
I'm just going off like face value here. Do you know that kind of way?
Yeah,
Which is the better looking, and which could I handle around the house more
Well,
so than
the
the others?
fact that you are currently with a man who would have serial killers' pictures hanging on his studio walls really says a lot about what you're willing to accept. So, okay, we can keep going. Yeah, okay.
While Tinker and Tex learned the art of manipulation, 2 other members of the family made a decision that would temporarily remove them from the clan entirely. William Earl Sawyer and his younger brother, Vilmer. Both boys chose to enlist in the United States Army. Their reasoning was simple. If their uncle Robert, the man the world came to know as Chop Top, had learned to kill more efficiently through military training, then they would do the same. The 2 brothers left Texas and entered a world far removed from the back roads and abandoned houses of the Sawyer clan. But their intentions were never patriotic. They wanted discipline, strategy, training, everything they believed would make them better killers when they eventually returned home.
And if that sounds insane to you, just remember the environment they were raised in. For the Sawyers, the army wasn't a way out, it was a continuing education. And the only thing that pisses me off the most about the Sawyers, and it's a surprising thing, why the fuck did they name the child Vilmer and not Wilmer? Wilmer is going to keep slipping out of my fucking mouth.
I know
they
why.
call him Vilmer.
Because they were cannibals. Ivan, Tusak, you're blood. Yep.
You say so.
So while VE, will we start calling all the W's V?
Yeah. Well,
While
we and Vilmer.
While WE and Vilmer disappeared into military life, Anne's branch of the family continued drifting across Texas, always moving, always watching, and always trying to solve the same problem: how to extend a bloodline that consisted entirely of men. Because no matter how well the Sawyers survived on the road without new children, the family would eventually die with them. And Anne Sawyer had already decided that extinction was not an option. By the late 1970s, Anne Sawyer had identified the greatest threat facing the clan. It wasn't the law, it wasn't revenge from the families of the missing, and it wasn't even hunger. It was mathematics. The Sawyer bloodline consisted almost entirely of men, and without women, the family had no future.
You can get away with murder for a long time if you're careful, but extinction, that clock never stops ticking. Ask the dinosaurs. What? You can't? Yeah, exactly. Move on.
Anne's first attempt at solving the problem was surprisingly measured. Rather than abducting women outright, the clan attempted something far more controlled: indoctrination. They began looking for the type of women society had already discarded: runaways, petty criminals, women drifting through the same forgotten highways the Sawyers themselves had been living on. And the idea was simple: find someone unstable enough to disappear without much attention, bring her slowly into the family, convince her the world outside the Sawyer clan had nothing left for her.
In other words, don't take hostages, recruit a believer. Now, is that not, out of all the things that happen, now obviously what happens after this is worse. Maybe worse. I don't know. But how much worse could it have gotten if this had went from being a family affair to a full-on family affair cult-wise? If they're recruiting, indoctrinating women into the fucking into the family.
What if they indoctrinated the whole family into the
Yeah,
family?
yeah. If they start franchising the Sawyers, how much worse are we
Wouldn't
here?
solve
Is this
the inbreeding
Charlie
problem.
Manson again? I mean, you know.
That's true. So for a brief period, the plan appeared workable. Several women were brought into the orbit of the family, and Tex proved especially effective during these encounters. He had inherited Drayton's natural charm.
And his sexiness.
Oh,
Drayton
yeah.
was a sexy bastard too.
Really? Combined with Anne's calm, controlled demeanor, he could present himself as something the Sawyers had rarely seen before: safe. Women trusted him, they spoke with him, and they followed him.
And if the story had stopped there, the Sawyers might have actually built the next generation the quiet way. But families like this don't fall apart because of outside pressure. They fall apart because of themselves.
And the first major problem came from Alfredo. As the eldest surviving son of Boss and Wilhelmina, Alfredo initially believed he should have first claim to any woman brought into the family.
Only natural.
Only natural. And Anne allowed it at first, but the arrangement quickly became a disaster. No shit. Alfredo was volatile and impatient, and according to rumors that circulated even within the family, he struggled with women in ways that left him humiliated and angry. More than one potential recruit died even simply because Alfredo lost control when things didn't go the way he expected. So do you mean he couldn't perform?
Yeah, which is a common problem when it comes to serial killers. I mean,
Really?
that's
so
a lot.
disgusted with themselves?
Well, no, but that's a lot to do with like the issues.
Why they do it?
Yeah, because they have number one, they can't talk to the women properly themselves, so they can't actually build a relationship to get to the point of sex. And then on top of it, you have any, I suppose, any fucking, what's the word I'm looking for? Insecurities that they may have, a lot that go along the way. And if Alfredo isn't getting a lot, maybe he had a quick, maybe his gun went off a little too fast. Maybe he just couldn't stay hard at all. Or maybe he was like the Golden State Killer and he just had a micro penis.
Yeah, or maybe he was like Louis XVI and his foreskin was too tight.
But
There's loads of different...
A lot of the reason behind the Golden State Killer, they reckon, is micro penis. They even say, no, Hitler was micro penis. This was the issue.
You see, for me, that makes sense with Hitler, because Hitler was short in stature, but it's kind of comical when I think of the Golden State Killer being that big and that... He's big. He's a tall guy, isn't he? Not as big as the Gilgo Beach, but I think he was... In my head,
but you see,
I've only seen him sitting down, though.
And you see, when it comes to the Gilgo Beach thing, and this is the thing, guys, forget, right? A lot of guys don't realize when it comes to penis size, a lot of your penis size is going to have to do with the weight that you're holding, because the weight, your fat, is getting in front of the penis, right? Or building around it, which means some of it is going back there. So I would have to assume that fat ass Rex Hooverman probably didn't have much packing down there either.
Himself when he looked down.
No, they definitely couldn't. I mean, he's like Peter Griffin, fucking evil cousin.
I can't think. He's the only. I mean, I think what they all do is awful, but he's the only serial killer that I feel genuinely repulsed at the back of my throat when I think about him. Genuinely, Golden State Killer. Just to go back to him, is 5'11".
So yeah, well, that's 3 inches taller. No, 3 inches smaller than me. 2 inches smaller than me.
4 inches taller than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not particularly tall.
No. Sorry, I thought he was towering. So after
So,
several,
hang on, it was me next, wasn't it?
I was trying to cover for you.
I got it. So obviously, this is not being able to perform here is if you can't perform for the women, it's almost like a performance review for the Sawyers because they have to be really particular about the women they're bringing in, and they have to maximize the vagina that is flowing through the farmhouse to get results.
Mm-hmm.
So Alfredo failed it repeatedly.
Exactly, yeah. And after several incidents, Anne removed that privilege entirely. Alfredo was demoted within the family hierarchy, and his responsibilities became purely labor, work, disposal, maintenance. The delicate work of interacting with outsiders would fall to others. But Alfredo wasn't the only problem. Tinker had little interest in long-term relationships at all. Where Anne saw women as potential mothers of the next generation, Tinker saw them as temporary entertainment.
And this is an issue that we see throughout the Sawyers. It seems like a lot of them didn't have any real motivation to seek a proper relationship. They were barely interested in sex as it was. Violence was their outlet,
Yeah. And so for Tinker, the thrill was never reproduction. It was control, torture, murder. And once that appetite took over, patience became impossible.
Yeah, like I said, Tinker didn't want a partner. He wanted a project.
Yeah. Tex proved far more capable of sustaining the illusion. But even he eventually discovered the limits of Anne's plan. One of the women he had been seeing for some time became suspicious. Arguments began. One night, the situation escalated. And during the fight, she threatened something that could have destroyed the entire clan. She said she would go to the police, and that single sentence changed everything.
Because if one person can say that, then eventually someone will follow through on it.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's essentially like, all right, we've had this issue once. If she
Kill them all.
We trusted this one, and it got this far, and we were close to fucking completing our mission, and she turned on us, which means if she can turn on us, anyone can turn on us. No, that plan's out the fucking door. Exactly. What do we do next?
The moment the words left her mouth, the indoctrination strategy was effectively finished, and Tex killed her shortly afterwards. And the family gathered to reassess the situation. Anne had tried the patient approach. She had tried persuasion. She tried slow recruitment. But every attempt had ended the same way. Fear, paranoia, and another body. The conclusion the family reached was brutally simple. Outsiders could never be trusted.
Which meant the only solution left was to stop pretending they could be a part of the family.
Yeah. And from that moment forward, the Sawyers abandoned the idea of integration entirely. Women would no longer be brought in as potential members of the clan. They would serve a single purpose, to ensure the bloodline continued. And once that purpose was fulfilled, they would be discarded like every other victim who had crossed the Sawyers family path. Once the indoctrination strategy failed, the Sawyers were left with only one option: efficiency. If outsiders couldn't be trusted to become part of the family, then they would never again be treated as potential family members. They would be treated as resources. And Anne didn't arrive at that conclusion lightly. For years, she had tried to build something that resembled stability for the clan. Something that allowed the Sawyers to continue their bloodline without attracting the kind of attention that had already begun circling in Drayton's branch of the family. But every attempt had ended the same way.
Fear, resistance, betrayal. The Sawyers don't do betrayal, they just eliminate it. Yeah. Out you fucking go.
Exactly. The new plan removed all uncertainty. Women would no longer be courted. They would no longer be persuaded, and they would no longer be trusted. They would be taken, and the process became mechanical. A woman would be abducted along the highways or from the same forgotten towns that the Sawyers had been drifting through for years. She would be restrained, used for reproduction, and once her usefulness ended, she would be disposed of the same way the family, as we said, disposed of any other victim.
Yeah, cold, efficient, and disturbingly practical.
Yeah. The Sawyers had unknowingly adopted the same philosophy that Bear Sawyer had built his own criminal enterprise around in San Antonio. People were no longer individuals, they were inventory. But the reality of the plan quickly revealed another problem. Years of inbreeding had taken their toll on the family line, and many of the pregnancies never lasted, and some of the women died before reaching full term. Others miscarried repeatedly. Without medical care, without proper nutrition, and with the brutality the clan inflicted during the process, survival was rare.
It turns out you can't exactly run a successful maternity program out of an abandoned farmhouse with only a chainsaw as your fucking main tool.
Do you know what's ironic about that, though? Chainsaws were originally invented to help during labor and childbirth.
Fuck off.
Swear, honest to God, they were kind of smaller chainsaws, but it was for, do you know, the episiotomy? Yeah,
I remember.
So going into bones.
Yeah, so for guys who don't know what that is, I was there when it happened. I couldn't look for a big horror fan.
You pussy.
So when Amy was giving birth to her first child, she ripped. They tore. No, she didn't rip. They cut
with the scissors.
With the scissors, what we would refer to as the gooch area.
I do not have a gooch.
Or whatever you call it.
My perennial sponge, or perennial sponge, whatever it's called.
From the bottom of her vagina to the bottom of her butthole. Whoosh. Wide open.
It's nice you can laugh about that.
Well, it didn't happen to me. Thank fuck it didn't happen to me.
This is why men
so bad though afterwards. Whatever about enjoying it. I could understand enjoying it. That you're in so much pain.
I don't remember it happening, yeah.
It doesn't register what's happening.
I remember
down
the stitches,
there.
I don't remember them doing that.
And you have a lot of fucking, obviously you have the
gas and air and the pethidine. And
did you have the injection at that point? What's it called?
The epidural, I did, but the epidural didn't work on me.
So, but even then, when you're in an extreme pain, other pains don't really bother you all that much. Do you know what I mean? It's not gonna get
me.
You know, you're not gonna think twice about it.
No.
But afterwards, holy shit, man! I don't know how you survived with the stitches, and then they got infected, and that sucked, and you had a fucking terrible.
Just me. It's pretty common for girls that like have the episiotomy or that rip when they get the stitches get infected.
Well, yeah, because down there in that area is where all the waste is, and you know, obviously, I mean, there's a reason we flush everything down the toilet, because if it's around us, it makes us sick. So you'd have to assume that it's the same discussion we have had about women with their Brazilian butt lifts. It's like, how do you recuperate from a Brazilian butt lift? How do you sit down? How do you lie down? How do you poop? How do you pee?
Probably the same as when you have the polyneurocytis in a surgery. You need to recuperate from that lying on your front for a couple of weeks.
What's that?
The polyneurocytis. You know, it's the thing on your. A lot of men get it. It's on the top of.
Where they dig it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Two of my friends have had it, and they were explaining it to me about how they had to like pack it. With like
I helped pack it for a friend when they needed a change, and believe me, it's fucking gnarly.
And I was on a night out with another one of my friends, and I went with him, but I remember turning to him and be like, "Bud, what? There's a bit of blood coming out of your butt at the top of your butt." And I was like, "Shit!"
Man.
And it was just like a little blood patch.
Why would you be out drinking after having?
Because we were in our
fresh?
early 20s, and we were just—it's what we did all the time. But yeah. It sucks. I was close to needing it, but didn't. So I'm okay. Thanks for fuck.
Yeah. So yeah, I just think it's funny that back to the discussion about chainsaws. They were first invented for childbirth, and the Sawyers never got to use one during childbirth.
Well, maybe not. I mean, there was one. Oh no, they didn't. We explain where that baby comes from. Okay, yeah.
So most attempts ended in failure, but there had been one exception. Years earlier, while Drayton's side of the family had been hiding in San Antonio, Bear Sawyer and the Bone Boys decided to conduct an experiment of their own. They wanted to see if they could create something new. Another Bubba, a second-generation monster that they could control. They abducted a drug-addicted sex worker and subjected her to the same brutal logic the Bone Boys used on everything else. Bubba was heavily dosed with steroids and Viagra, and the woman was forced into repeated encounters until she eventually became pregnant. And against all expectations, she survived the ordeal. Months later, she gave birth, but the child was not what Bear had hoped for. The baby was a girl.
Which for Bear meant failure. But for the Sawyers, it meant something else entirely. Now, I know what people are saying, but Bear already had a daughter. Why would he be upset with this daughter? The thing about it was they weren't trying to make a new child. They were trying to make a new fucking Leatherface.
Exactly.
They wanted a new monster, a second monster, a monster of their own. And when they came out as a girl, he was like, well, she can't turn out like him. So off you go.
Rather than raise the child themselves, the Bone Boys made a decision. If the child belonged to Bubba, she belonged with the Sawyers. The infant was sent north to Anne. She named the child Barbara. But within the family, she would become known by another Sawyer, by another name even, Babby Sawyer.
Yeah. For years, Bubba never knew the child existed. The Bone Boys kept the secret while they continued using him as a monstrous enforcer when they had him nicknamed Amped. But everything changed after the collapse of San Antonio operations and the events that eventually led to the arrest of Drayton and Chop Robert in Dallas. When Anne's branch of the family finally returned to Newt County in 1986, Bubba learned the truth. He was a daddy. He had a daughter.
And for the first time, anyone in the clan could remember the hulking killer who had terrified countless victims showed something resembling tenderness. Babby became the closest thing the Sawyers had to hope. Proof that the bloodline could survive, and proof that the plan might actually work. But the clan still had a problem. One child would not rebuild a family, and if they wanted the Sawyer name to continue, they would need many more.
If she was going to rebuild the family, she was going to have a lot of fucking work ahead of her.
Oh.
And a lot of uncles standing there. A lot of creepy uncles. That's a lot of creepy uncles.
Creepy uncles are the worst.
But that's a lot of creepy uncles to deal with. And you got to
dance with
be
them at
creepy
every wedding.
You got to be creepy with all those uncles. And yeah, creepy is incest. That's what we're talking about.
For more than a decade, Anne's branch of the Sawyer clan lived like shadows moving through rural Texas. They kept to back roads, they avoided the towns that still had functioning police departments, and they stayed far away from Newt County. That land had become too dangerous. The Hardesty incident had turned the region into a quiet legend, the kind that lingered in local memory even when authorities could never prove what actually happened. So Anne had taken the family elsewhere, allowing time and distance to bury the story. But in 1986, that distance suddenly disappeared. News reports began circulating across Texas about a violent confrontation beneath an abandoned amusement park outside Dallas. The location had been known as Texas Battleland. Authorities had uncovered a hidden complex beneath the property, a place that appeared to have been used for the storage and preparation of human remains. 2 men were taken into custody following this discovery, Drayton Sawyer and Robert Chop Top Sawyer.
Which, if you're Anne sitting somewhere out on the Texas back roads watching the evening news, is the worst possible headline you could see, because once the law gets a name, they start pulling at threads.
Yeah. The details emerging even from Dallas were chaotic. Investigators were attempting to piece together what had happened inside the underground tunnels of Battleland. Bodies have been found. Evidence of human consumption had been suggested, but the reports were inconsistent, and the authorities themselves seemed unsure of what exactly they had uncovered.
That's what happens when you stumble onto something you don't understand. Your brain tries to make it smaller, something manageable.
One detail stood out to Anne immediately. Despite the arrests of Drayton and Chop Top, the reports made no mention of 2 other figures the family knew would have been present. There was no reference to Bubba, and there was no mention of Earl Sawyer, Grandpa.
Yeah, she wasn't very happy to hear Wilhelmina's body had been retrieved and cremated. That took a few days of grieving to get over, but she still had an ancient corpse and a monster to find. Now, think about that for a second. If Drayton and Robert were caught, but Bubba wasn't listed anywhere in the reports, where do you think he would have went afterwards?
Well, for Anne, the answer was obvious. He went home. The old Sawyer house in Newt County had always been the centre of the family, even after the Hardesty incident and even after the clan scattered across Texas. If Bubba had escaped the events in Dallas, there was only one place he would return to: the house.
And if Bubba made it back then Grandpa might still be there too, old Earl. At least one shrine from the past may still be salvageable. And for Anne, that was almost as important as keeping the family together. She took that whole shrine business a bit more seriously than Drayton did. You know, Grandpa at the head of the table, Wilhelmina in the corner. So missing Wilhelmina was a big deal, but having Grandpa back.
Okay. Within days, Anne made the decision. The clan would return to Newt County for the first time since leaving years earlier. Alfredo, Tinker, Tex, and Babby. Anne's branch of the family began the journey back toward the land they had abandoned. They didn't know what they would find waiting for them there. They only knew that if Bubba had survived, he would not survive long alone. Because the world outside the Sawyer family had never been kind to him. And without the clan, Bubba Sawyer was not a hunter. He was prey. When Anne and the others finally crossed back into Newt County, the place barely resembled the land they had once known. Years earlier, the region had begun to decline. Industry had dried up, jobs vanished, families had moved away in search of something better. But after the Hardesty incident, the decay accelerated. Rumours had spread, stories about a house full of bones, about a giant man wearing human skin, about travellers who simply vanished along the back roads. Whether those stories were true or not almost didn't matter. People stopped coming.
Yeah, fear does what unemployment can't. It empties towns faster than anything else.
By the time Anne returned in late 1986, much of Newt County had become something close to wasteland. The highways were quieter, the houses were empty. Entire stretches of land had been reclaimed by dust and weeds, which suited the Sawyers perfectly. Isolation had always been their greatest ally. But Anne wasn't interested in the empty towns. She was looking for one place in particular, the house.
Because if Bubba survived Dallas, that's where he'd be.
When the family finally reached the property, the sight waiting for them was both familiar and deeply unsettling. The house still stood, weathered, rotting in places, but still intact. Inside, they found exactly what they had expected. Bubba Sawyer.
And he was not the same Bubba who had left there years earlier.
The man they found living there was diminished, malnourished, terrified. Months of isolation had taken their toll. With no one left to guide him, Bubba had survived the only way he knew how. Rats, roadkill, whatever scraps he could scavenge during the quiet hours of the night. And despite everything, despite the hunger and the loneliness, one thing inside the house had not changed. Grandpa. Earl Sawyer still sat at the head of the table, the same position he had occupied for decades, the patriarch of a family that refused to be left rest.
That's the thing about the Sawyers. Death doesn't end your responsibilities. It just changes the way you participate. I mean, you see that with fucking Wilhelmina. We've seen that with Earl. We've even seen it with Nubbins. With Chop Top walking around fucking holding the corpse like he's a fucking little Muppet. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy shit.
For Bubba, the return of the family was more than survival. It was reunion. For the first time since the chaos in Dallas, he was no longer alone. But Anne understood something immediately. They could not stay there. The old house had become too dangerous, too recognizable, too tied to the stories that had already begun circulating across Texas. The Sawyers needed to remain close to their territory, but hidden from the eyes that might eventually come looking.
Yeah, same hunting grounds, new blinds.
So the clan began searching the surrounding land. Newt County was vast, and much of it was abandoned, and it didn't take long before they found what they needed. A farmhouse buried deep within a stretch of swampy woodland, roughly 10 miles from the original Sawyer house. Close enough to maintain their connection to the land, but far enough away that no one would stumble across it by accident.
Which meant the Sawyers had a home again, and this time they planned to do things a little differently.
The farmhouse Anne chose didn't look like much. From the road, it barely existed at all. The structure sat deep inside a stretch of woodland that had long ago begun turning swampy as the land around Newt County fell into neglect. The dirt access road leading to it had almost disappeared under weeds and mud. Trees leaned inward from both sides, forming a kind of natural tunnel that blocked the house from casual view, which was exactly what Anne wanted.
Because the Sawyers had learned something the hard way. You don't hide in plain sight anymore. You hide where no one bothers to look.
The house itself had once been part of a working farm. Decades earlier, it might have supported livestock, crops, and a family that made its living from the surrounding land. By the time the Sawyers discovered it, the property had been abandoned long enough to ensure that nature had begun reclaiming it. The barn had partially collapsed, the fields were grown wild, and the swamp that surrounded the property on three sides had slowly expanded into what used to be unstable farmland, usable farmland even. But for the Sawyers, that isolation was an advantage. There were no nearby neighbours, no active farms, and very little traffic along the back roads that cut through the region. Newt County had become what Anne needed it to be, empty.
Which is a polite way of saying, no one can hear you scream out here.
Yeah, it's like space. Once the decision was made, the clan went to work, transforming the property into something that could sustain them. Bubba helped reinforce the house. Alfredo handled the heavy labour, clearing brush and digging disposal pits in the swampy ground where the waterlogged soil made it difficult for anything to be found later.
I feel bad for Alfredo. He's been emasculated by the family. He's been kind of to be demoted by your own family from
Can't get the job done.
From sex haver to worker, labourer.
No sex haver. Sex with nutter.
But Tinker, he focused on the practical needs of the operation. Storage areas, tools, methods of moving bodies without leaving obvious evidence. Tex, meanwhile, continued developing the role he had already begun mastering. Public interaction. Every family business needs someone who can smile at the customers.
And that was where Alfredo would prove unexpectedly useful again. Not because of his intelligence, but because of geography. Just a few miles from the original Sawyer property sat the gas station that Drayton had once operated before the Hardesty incident. The building had sat empty for years. Rust creeping across the pumps, the structure itself barely holding together, but it still occupied the same strategic location it always had. A lonely stretch of highway where travellers occasionally stopped for fuel before continuing deeper into Texas. Anne saw an opportunity. The gas station would reopen, but not under the name Sawyer. Alfredo would run the place using a new identity, a name that sounded ordinary enough to pass unnoticed. Alfredo Slaughter.
Yeah.
Come on, like.
Unnoticed my fucking balls. I mean, it's a hell of a last name choice if you're trying to stay subtle about shit, you know?
Yeah.
But maybe it was hiding in plain sight. It's like, Slaughter, he couldn't possibly. Maybe he's related to Sergeant Slaughter. Maybe they're just a wrestling family. We're in Texas. That seems logical enough.
I think if I was hell-bent on using the name Slaughter the way that's spelt, I would have changed the pronunciation to Slafter.
Ah, come on.
Slafter.
If you're not a serial killer and you're into all this shit that we're into, Slaughter is a fucking awesome surname.
It is, but they want it to go unnoticed.
Again, Alfredo, not the sharpest fucking knife in the drawer.
But from the outside, the station looked like nothing more than another struggling roadside business clinging to survival along a dying highway. But for the Sawyers, it served far more important purpose. It allowed them to watch the road, to see who passed through Newt County, and occasionally to decide who wouldn't be leaving it. Over time, the name Alfredo Slaughter would become known to the few travellers who still stopped in that forgotten part of Texas.
And years later, one member of the Sawyer clan would take inspiration from it and begin building something of his own. A gang, a name, a reputation. But that story belongs to the future. For now, the Sawyers had something they had not possessed since the Hardesty incident. A base, a hidden house, and a hunting ground that had grown quieter with every passing year.
For nearly 4 years, the Sawyers operated from their hidden farmhouse without attracting much attention. The isolation of Newt County worked in their favour. The old industries that once kept the area alive had disappeared. Farms had closed, towns had emptied, And long stretches of road that once carried steady traffic were now little more than forgotten back routes used by the occasional traveller trying to avoid the interstate, which meant when someone vanished out there, it often took a very long time before anyone noticed.
And the Sawyers understood something about people that most criminals never quite figure out. You don't have to hide a body if the place you're operating is already forgotten.
Over time, the disappearances began to accumulate. Travellers passing through Newt County, hitchhikers moving along the rural highways, the occasional drifter who made the mistake of accepting a ride from the wrong person. Most of them simply disappeared. Their vehicles sometimes abandoned miles away from where they were last seen, sometimes never found at all. But what authorities would eventually discover in the summer of 1990 revealed something far worse than a handful of isolated killings.
No, in August of that year, a pit was uncovered on land just outside of Newt County. At first, investigators believed they'd stumbled upon a single burial site. But the more they dug, the more disturbing the discovery became, because this wasn't a grave, it was a dumping ground.
The pit contained human remains, dozens of them. But they were not intact bodies. What investigators found were pieces, limbs, fragments of bone, torn clothing, and partial skeletal remains layered on top of each other in various stages of decomposition. The condition of the remains made it almost impossible to determine an exact number of victims. Estimates ranged anywhere from 40 to 70 people. Some of the remains appeared relatively recent, and others had been buried long enough that only bone fragments remained.
Which tells you something important.
Mhm.
This wasn't a single incident, it was a pattern.
Yeah.
But of course, obviously, 4 fucking episodes in, we know there's no single incident when it comes to a fucking Sawyer matter. They don't call it a massacre for nothing.
That's true. Investigators also noticed another disturbing detail. The few bodies that remained mostly intact appeared to belong to women. Those victims showed extreme signs of torture and mutilation, particularly around the genital area. The scattered body parts that made up the majority of the pit, however, were overwhelmingly male.
Which lines up perfectly with what we know about the Sawyers. The men, food. The women, something else entirely.
The discovery immediately triggered a regional investigation. Authorities began examining missing persons reports from across Texas and neighboring states, trying to match the remains with people who had vanished along the highways during the previous decade. But the nature of the remains made identification difficult. Many victims had been dismembered. Others appeared to have been partially consumed. And some of the bones showed signs that they had originally been buried elsewhere before being moved to the pit.
Meaning some of those remains might not even belong to fresh victims. They could have been taken from graves, which, if you remember from earlier chapters, is something the Sawyers had plenty of experience with.
Yeah. For the Sawyers, the discovery of the pit created a problem. Not because they feared the authorities would immediately find them, but because the investigation forced law enforcement to begin paying attention to a region that had largely been ignored for years. Roadblocks appeared on certain highways. Detours were established, and the quiet back roads surrounding Newt County suddenly became much busier than the Sawyers preferred. One of those detours would soon send a pair of travellers directly into the heart of their territory. A young couple driving across the country, a survivalist travelling alone, and a trap that had been perfected over years of practice. The next time someone stopped at Alfredo Slaughter's gas station, the Sawyers would be waiting.
The mind of a predator. Heat's on, cops sniffing around. Let's go hunting. Fucking idiots.
Yeah. The discovery of the body pit outside Newt County forced law enforcement to temporarily shut down several of the surrounding highways. Roadblocks were set up. Traffic was restricted. And travelers who had planned to pass through Texas using the main routes suddenly found themselves being pushed onto back roads that had barely been used in years. One of those detours would send a young couple directly into Sawyer territory. Michelle Shatnell and Ryan MacArthur had been driving across the country from California to Florida, and the trip had a practical purpose. Michelle had agreed to deliver a car to her father, but the long drive also gave the couple something else they needed: time. Their relationship had been struggling, and they had decided to use the journey as an opportunity to figure out whether they still had a future together.
Nothing like 1,000 miles trapped in a car with someone to test the relationship.
Whew. The detour caused by the investigation near Newt County eventually brought them to a lonely stretch of highway where the only visible sign of life was an aging roadside gas station. The sign out front read, "Last Chance Gas." The owner introduced himself as Alfredo Slaughter.
Which again is a hell of a name choice if you're trying to blend in.
Ryan handled the gas while Michelle stepped inside the building to use the restroom. And unbeknownst to her, Alfredo had installed a small peephole in the wall of the bathroom, and he watched her through it.
Of course he did.
Yeah.
What else would I go? Well, I suppose they're sexually frustrated, the man now. What else is he going to... They don't have internet porn yet. And for people before the internet, they used to have peepholes in toilets, and that's how men got through. I'm only joking. That's not how men do it. That's not how you should do that ever. Those holes in the toilets are for your penis, not your eyes. Jesus Christ, people.
I don't know how men have the guts to stick their penises into one of those. I'd be too afraid like something would go chop it off.
Anyway, subtlety was never been a Sawyer Family strong suit, so
No.
This was par for the course when it came to Alfredo.
While Michelle was inside, another traveller approached Ryan near the pumps, a young man carrying a backpack, and he introduced himself as Tex. Tex explained that he was hitchhiking his way out of Texas and asked if Ryan and Michelle might be able to give him a lift once they finished fueling up. Ryan hesitated, but before he could respond, Tex suddenly turned towards the building and shouted. He had caught Alfredo peeping through the bathroom wall, and what followed appeared to be a heated confrontation between the two men. Alfredo emerged from the station carrying a shotgun. Tex shouted at Ryan and Michelle to leave immediately.
Just like that, the trap was already closing in on them. They don't even know.
The argument escalated quickly. Alfredo fired the shotgun, and the blast tore into one of the tires on Michelle's car. Panicked, Ryan jumped behind the wheel while Michelle climbed onto the passenger seat. Tex shouted for them to take a nearby back road that he claimed would reconnect them to the main highway. And as the car sped away, Alfredo fired the shotgun again. From the perspective of Ryan and Michelle, it appeared that the blast had struck Tex, and they saw him collapse on the road, but the entire scene had been staged.
Classic Sawyer strategy. Create chaos, push the victim exactly where you want him to go. But I got a question.
Tell me.
What fucking caliber of fucking tires are you Americans using that they can be shot at, blasted out, and you can keep driving? I've ran over a nail before and shredded my entire tire within 2 minutes of driving.
If it was me and somebody was at a shot, I don't care what damage it would do to the rims of my wheel. I'd be getting out of there, flat tire or no flat tire, even though the noise is annoying as fuck.
It's not just that, but I mean, you could crash.
Oh, I know you could crash, but rock in a hard place here. So by the time the couple realised something was wrong, they were already deep into the back road Tex had suggested. And the tire Alfredo destroyed was beginning to fail. Eventually, the vehicle could go no further. Ryan pulled over and began to attempt to change the damaged tire. Michelle kept watch along the quiet roadside. They had no idea that further up the road, hidden in the darkness and waiting exactly where he had been instructed to wait, Bubba Sawyer was already ready to strike.
And once Bubba enters the equation, the night usually doesn't end well for anybody.
Ryan had barely begun working on the damaged tire when the attack came. Out of the darkness along the roadside emerged the towering figure the Sawyers had spent decades perfecting. A hulking man wearing a mask stitched from human skin. In his hands was the weapon that had already become a legend across rural Texas, a chainsaw.
Bubba Sawyer had been waiting exactly where Tex and Alfredo expected the couple to stop. Because when the Sawyers set a trap, they make sure every road leads to the same place, to where they want you to be. These bastards are playing fucking hillbilly chess with all these people.
The attack sent Ryan and Michelle running. They managed to escape the initial assault, scrambling back into the car and forcing the damaged vehicle further down the road. But the tire that Alfredo had shot earlier had never been properly secured during the roadside repair. And it finally tore free completely. The car lost control, and the vehicle crashed head-on into an approaching truck. The truck belonged to a man named Benny Forey. a military survival enthusiast traveling through Texas. Benny later told investigators that just before the collision, he saw a bloodied man standing further down the road, a man matching the description of the hitchhiker Michelle and Ryan had encountered at the gas station, Tex.
Which means the trap was still unfolding exactly the way the Sawyers had planned it.
After the crash, the three survivors regrouped and began to make sense of what had just happened. Ryan explained the situation with the gas station. Michelle described the attack on the roadside. And Benny began to suspect that whoever had staged the encounter back at the station was still somewhere nearby. The group decided to search the area for the injured hitchhiker they believed Alfredo had shot. And what they didn't know was that the Sawyers were already hunting for someone else entirely. Two young women named Gina and Sarah Hudson. The sisters had been abducted weeks earlier and held captive by the family. Their parents had already been killed and consumed by the clan. The girls themselves had been kept alive for a very specific reason, and that was Anne's plan for rebuilding the bloodline.
And when you're dealing with the Sawyers, escape attempts don't usually end all that well.
The sisters had managed to flee the farmhouse earlier that evening, and the family had already begun searching the woods to recover them when Michelle, Ryan, and Benny crashed nearby. Gina was found first.
Yeah, Bubba located her in the woods not far from the road. She was killed and taken back to the farmhouse. Sarah Hudson was still somewhere in the trees. I love though how one escape attempt that nearly fucking gets them away is enough for them to be like, that's it. Just like Alfredo, you're demoted. You are no longer baby making material, you're meat.
Meanwhile, Benny encountered another man on the road, a tow truck driver offering help, and he introduced himself as Tinker.
Another Sawyer, another lie.
During their conversation, Benny noticed something in the back of the truck, a damaged chainsaw. Realizing that the man might be connected to the attack Michelle had described, Benny confronted him, and the encounter quickly turned violent. Benny managed to escape into the woods, losing Tinker in the darkness, but while hiding in the brush, he encountered someone else. Bubba. The chainsaw roared again, and Benny's survival instincts kicked in. Before Bubba could finish him, another figure stepped forward from the trees. Sarah Hudson.
According to Benny's later testimony, the girl had already lost the will to live. Whatever she had endured inside the Sawyer farmhouse had broken her. She told Benny to run to find Ryan and Michelle, and she would distract Bubba. Moments later, the chainsaw started again. Sarah Hudson's body would later be found in pieces in the woods. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is buy someone else a few more minutes.
Benny fled deeper into the woods, but the chaos unfolding around Newt County was only getting worse, because while Benny fought for survival, Ryan and Michelle had already been captured, and the place they were about to be taken was the farmhouse where the rest of the Sawyer clan had been waiting all along. While the family inside the farmhouse prepared their next meal, another part of the hunt was still unfolding outside. Alfredo Sawyer had not returned to the house. Anne had given him a simple task: find the survivor.
Yeah, the man she referred to as, and this is her quote, not mine, the dark meat. Yes, Benny Forey is black. Because from Anne's point of view, Benny wasn't just a witness; he was now inventory. He was something to be.
Okay.
Inventory. See, I'm used
Inventory.
to inventory is from me playing video games too much.
Wait, who says inventory in video games?
Definitely Resident Evil, or at least when I used to play it as a kid, one of my friends used to constantly call it inventory, and that's why that stuck with me.
It's like a laboratory.
Inventory. Yeah, inventory. Yeah, you're right.
Moving through the dark woods surrounding the property, Alfredo searched for a man who had slipped through Bubba's hands earlier that night, but Benny had already changed the balance for the hunt. Using the same survival instincts that had kept him alive this far, Benny managed to ambush Alfredo in the darkness. The two men struggled violently, and in the end, Benny managed to incapacitate him, leaving Alfredo unconscious in the brush. But Benny had gained something far more important than a moment of safety. He now knew exactly where the Sawyers were operating.
And more importantly, he knew where his truck was.
Earlier that night, Tinker had towed Benny's vehicle back to the farmhouse property. And inside that truck was something Benny had not been able to reach during the earlier chaos, a semi-automatic rifle. When Benny retrieved it, the night changed instantly. Inside the farmhouse, the Sawyers were preparing to butcher Ryan. His body was being taken down from the meat hooks. Anne was already directing the family's next steps. Michelle remained restrained in the kitchen, and the corpse of Grandpa still sat silently in the corner. Then the gunfire started.
Hold up. A big chunk of my script has went missing.
I have 66 pages.
Huh?
I have 66 pages.
Well, we are missing a big, huge piece here, and I am just going to fill the people in on what that is. So, like we said earlier on, or did we mention it earlier on? No, we didn't, because we haven't talked about Babby. So, we definitely haven't spoken about it yet. I don't know where the fuck that went.
I did mention Babby.
Very, very earlier we mentioned Babby.
Yeah,
but
she
we
was
haven't.
born.
Yeah. So, when Benny is talking to Sarah Hudson, and she tells him to go find Michelle and Ryan, they have already taken off running, and they're screaming looking for Benny as well. And Benny can hear them screaming. Suddenly the screaming there's one loud roar, and then there's silence. Ryan had ran into a bear trap that the Sawyers had. They had many of these lying around the wooded area around their house.
Okay.
And Ryan had got caught by the bear trap. Which is what brought him, how he got dragged back to the house in the first place. They trapped him. Michelle kept running.
Okay.
Michelle found the Sawyer house first. She believed, like Sally had before her, that she had found a bit of amnesty, somewhere to run for protection, some neighbours she can knock on the door for safety. But when she gets there and she goes into the house, obviously she realizes she fucked up. Well, not instantly fucked up. She runs up the stairs, just like Sally. I don't know why these women keep running up the stairs. It's a bad idea. She couldn't find anyone downstairs. Straight upstairs, and she finds a child's room. Inside the child's room were baby toys, dolls, bones, and one or two body parts. And a little blonde 11-ish, 12-year-old girl being Babby Sawyer. Babby kept her distracted because obviously that puts you off. I mean, you walk into a room, you see a little child, you're like, okay, there's a little child here. This has to be a safe zone. There must be a family around here somewhere. Why they leave her in this room with all this fucked up shit, I don't know. But Babby kept Michelle busy enough or distracted long enough for Tex to come up behind her and gain control of Michelle.
Okay.
He then brought Michelle down into the kitchen. Where she found Ryan had been hooked by two meat hooks through the ankles and elevated up into the air. Yeah. So he was hanging from the ceiling over like a sink.
He's been bled, was he?
Blood. Yeah. I would assume for blood, yeah. And in front of those hooks, if you're watching the video, this is a lot easier to understand. There was a huge sledgehammer. So this kind of goes back to Nubbins talking about how the sledgehammer was the better way to deal with the slaughter of animals over what are they called? Pneumatic guns? Pneumatic,
yeah.
And basically the sledge was held up. It was on a hinge. It was latched to the ceiling. And when lever was pulled, it would release the locking mechanism that was on the sledgehammer or on the sledgehammer's swing, and the sledgehammer would then swing right down and directly into where Ryan's head would be, killing the
meat.
Yeah, the product in their eyes.
Yeah.
So at this point, she had been brought down into the kitchen. Yeah. She had been tied to a kitchen chair, but that wasn't enough. She had then had two large nails driven through each hand to keep her attached to the chair. So obviously the Sawyers had changed furniture. They weren't using bone furniture anymore. This was fucking proper old school wooden chairs. Nice. What surprised her the most from her testimony later was how cold Babby was. Babby came in and she was still very childlike, very whimsical, very fucking, Disney girl kind of fucking esque in her mannerisms. But she had a thirst for blood as well.
Yeah.
And Grandpa was there. Definitely dead this time. No dispute, no meat puppet fucking job. He was literally like eyes hollowed out. There was nothing left in the eyes. It was only completely ringed, completely shriveled. It was just a corpse. So there was no debating it this time, even though we haven't debated it in 4 fucking episodes. We said the bastard was dead, despite what the Sawyers claimed. So she's sitting there. She's stuck there, and Anne comes in. Anne explains, she kind of plays the Drayton part. Whereas Drayton kind of explained to Sally Hardesty at the time that this was just what they had to do. They had to get meat somehow. They had to get product. They had to feed the family. They had to feed the business. And kind of did that role as well. But she was discussing more the feeding side of it being Ryan, and that she was going to be left, Michelle was going to be left live a little longer. 9 months longer, to be exact. So that they could continue on with the baby making thing that they were doing. But what was specifically fucked up was that when it came time to butcher Ryan, first they had to kill him because Ryan still wasn't dead at this point. He had only been trapped in a bear trap, ankles had hooks through him, but still very much alive. Tinker and Tex were discussing who was going to get to pull the lever this time. When the, again, 11, 12-year-old, I think 12-year-old, Babby stepped forward and said, "You promised me that the next one was mine." Yikes. So with the assistance of her uncle Tex, Babby pulled the lever that released the sledgehammer and drew her first blood, her first kill in Ryan MacArthur, and that was the end of him. And he was then being pulled down to be butchered for future dinners, and that's where we left off with Benny and his fucking gun. So to go back at this point, while all this is happening inside the house, Benny Forey is outside the house, incapacitating Alfredo, finding his truck, and being the survivalist militant psychopath that he was, the truck is heavily armed. So take it away, sexy lady.
This is when the gunfire started.
Sure is.
Bullets tore through the farmhouse walls and windows exploded inward. Wood splintered across the room.
You're going to have to show me where we are in the script now.
Page 58, bottom of it, where my cursor is.
See, this is the problem. I'm looking at my tablet now, and it doesn't have pages on it anymore.
God.
Can
you find me?
I'm at section 11, Assault on the Farmhouse. So it's going to make for a great episode. Dark meat, yeah, I got that part. Okay, so obviously I'm coming down a little bit further. Inside the farmhouse, the Sawyers were preparing to butcher Ryan. His body had been taken off from the meat hooks and had already directed the family in the next steps.
I'm going to add a space. You should be able to
Michelle remained staring. Grandpa's corpse and the windows exploded inwards and the wood splintered across the room. Nobody gets to see me do all that motion because I had the camera on you the whole time. You got to see a pretty sight, but you didn't get to see me with all my animation.
Right, Josh.
So,
lock the place.
Okay. If there was any dispute about whether Grandpa was dead or not, that's out the window now. Because Grandpa, his corpse, Earl Sawyer's corpse, gets fucking shredded immediately with rifle fire, ripping through the chair where the family patriarch had sat for decades.
And Anne was struck. Tinker fell moments later as another burst of gunfire tore through the kitchen.
And just like that, the Sawyer house stopped being the hunter's den and became a full-on fucking battlefield.
Sudden violence shattered the control the family had maintained for years. Tex managed to escape the house before the rifle fire could reach him. He burst out into the yard, axe in hand, searching for the man responsible. And he found him, Benny Forey, standing in the darkness with the rifle raised.
So Tex charged at this guy. Unlike the others, Tex always preferred direct confrontation. He liked the fight.
Yeah.
The rest of them liked the slaughter, the kill, the afterwards. Well, I suppose like once the twins had a hold of you, they enjoyed fucking mocking. Chop Top and Nubbins were known for their mockery of their victims beforehand. I mean, didn't work out too well from their last 2 times, but whatever. So the axe swung hard through the darkness towards Benny, but Tex missed. The blade slammed into the side of Tinker's tow truck, right into the fuel tank. Gasoline spilled across the metal frame of the truck and down over Tex himself, which is the moment Tex realized something terrible. He had just turned himself into kindling.
Yep. Benny did not hesitate. He struck a match. The flame dropped, and in seconds, Tex Sawyer was engulfed. The fire lit the yard like a signal flare as Tex screamed and stumbled through the darkness. Within moments, he collapsed, the flames consuming what remained of Anne's eldest son. And inside the farmhouse, the chaos had given Michelle the opportunity that she needed.
Driven by pure survival instinct, she tore her hands free from the nails that had been driven through them and into the chair. Now, see, that wouldn't have made any sense if I didn't explain all the missing script. I don't know where the fuck that piece of script went. I remember
I was looking at the page numbers and I was like, there's 66 fucking pages here. Is he sure?
I am certain there was, I mean, you heard all the story I had to tell there.
No,
I know.
It's in there. Good job
so
remembering
much for my perfect fucking series. we met.
That is fine.
Nothing's perfect. You need these little flaws.
Exactly. Show us that we're human. Bleeding and desperate, Michelle ran out of the house and into the woods.
And Bubba saw her go.
A massive man charged after her, and everything Bubba knew had just been destroyed. Anne was dead, the house was burning, the family that surrounded him moments later was collapsing.
Earlier,
and Michelle was running. He's a time-traveling Leatherface.
If they were standing afterwards, then he was making a lot of meat puppets in a very short space of time.
It's true.
But maybe he'd gotten good at it with all the sewing of the faces and stuff. He had multiple masks.
Maybe. The chainsaw roared as he pursued her through the trees. The chase carried him towards the swamp bordering the property. There, Benny intercepted them. The struggle was brutal and desperate, and Benny fought to keep Bubba away from Michelle as the giant swung wildly through the darkness.
Then Michelle found a rock. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, to be exact. He gave him a rock bottom, people's elbow. End of story. See you next week. No, she struck Bubba across the side of the head with the rock. Not with Dwayne Johnson, with an actual rock.
I would be impressed if she swung at him with the rock.
He would have been a lot younger in 1990.
far more liftable.
But no,
he was a bit bigger, was he?
At that point, wouldn't he? He would have been fucking huge. Anyway, we're going to put people right off here and not understand what. She picked up an actual rock from the ground and hit Bubba across the head with it. The massive man staggered, lost his footing, and fell backward into the swampy water. The swampy water where Alfredo had been using for years to dispose of body parts. I would assume there was a crocodile in there, which, funny enough, now makes me fucking think. Because when we talked about Pearl Douglas, we discussed the fact that a lot of the reason Pearl was getting away with what she was getting away with was, number one, she was feeding the crocodile alligator fucking the bodies, and number two, the Sawyers were so fucking busy during her period of murder that everything kind of got associated to a Sawyer kind of killing, and that kept her off the radar for a long time. But saying that, she died in the 70s, which would mean, and the alligator, I'm pretty sure, probably got it. Did the alligator die at that point?
No, I think the alligator died. I think we looked this up to see
Maybe
if the alligator
the gator moved. I got to see how close Newt County is to where Pearl was. We'll figure it out. Anyway.
So neither Benny nor Michelle stayed to see whether Bubba would emerge from the water. They ran back toward the property, toward the only vehicle that they left that could get them out of Newt County. And Benny found a truck parked near the farmhouse. As Michelle climbed into the passenger seat, the nightmare seemed finally close to ending.
Then Alfredo appeared, which tends to happen with the Sawyers. Just when you think they're gone, they get back up.
Earlier that night, Benny had only managed to incapacitate him. Now Alfredo came charging through the darkness, attacking the pair beside the truck. Benny barely avoided the first strike, but Michelle had already found something inside the vehicle, a shotgun. She raised it, pulled the trigger, and Alfredo Sawyer fell dead beside the truck. Moments later, Benny and Michelle drove away from the farmhouse and into the Texas dawn, just as Sally Hardesty had done 17 years earlier. By the time the authorities arrived hours later, the scene they encountered was unlike anything most of them had ever seen. The bodies of Ann Sawyer, Richard Tinker Sawyer, Edward Tex Sawyer, and Alfredo Sawyer. Inside the ruined house, investigators also discovered the long decomposing corpse of Earl Sawyer, the family patriarch.
Fucking end of an era here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's making me a bit sad.
Or Earl and Wilhelmina, no. Gone.
God.
In the woods surrounding the property, they located the remains of Gina and Sarah Hudson. Their parents' partial remains were later discovered in a nearby swamp, but two figures were still missing, Bubba Sawyer and Barbara Babby Sawyer, which means the same story had now happened 4 times.
Witnesses once again described a massive man wearing a mask of human skin and carrying a chainsaw. And once again, authorities refused to accept the existence of such a figure.
Because investigators insisted that Leatherface was nothing more than a persona.
Yeah.
A mask used by multiple members of the family to frighten victims. A legend, not a real man. Which, I mean, when you hear descriptions of him over the years, his body size changes. He's big. Sometimes they refer to him as a giant. Sometimes he's a little slider. His hair is different. Sometimes he's more masculine, and as time goes by, he gets more feminine. Then you have the whole Dallas shit where he's steroided up and he's huge. So, I mean, to hear this whole story in a bubble, you'd be like, well, yeah, he changes appearances so many times, or size and weight, and so many times. It must be them switching from one family member to just wearing a mask. But realistically, when you look at it, in the space of a fucking year, I could change weight, weight and size, and that could happen with anybody. So when we're talking about a period now of 20 odd years between we're talking 17 years from 1973 to 1990 at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and with everything he's been through, all the moving around, the different types of food consumption, the lack of food, the excess food, the fucking steroids, the no steroids. This man's body had to be all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
If you were to take a guess at this point, we are now on episode 4. Do you believe Leatherface is a real person, or do you think it's the family using a mask to scare people? Do you think he was a design by the family to keep people frightened?
I think he was real.
You think Jedediah was a genuine brother?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
because I mean, like, they controlled him very easily.
But you could still control some of it if they're acting the part of Jedediah. It's like, okay, you try on the mask today and you freak him out, and then tomorrow, Tinker, it's your turn to wear the
But
mask.
control them behind doors as well.
Maybe.
But the missing child, however, raised far more questions. Babby Sawyer had vanished alongside Bubba. No body, no trace, and for years no one could explain where she had gone. But the story of the Sawyer family was not finished, because the final chapter was still waiting to be told.
And maybe in that final chapter, we will reveal what happened to Babby Sawyer. Maybe it'll require extra chapters. Who knows? All I know is that the Sawyer story, the Sawyer side of the story, ends next week with episode 100.
Nice.
Whew! We've been doing it for fucking 100. Well, we've been doing a lot more. Well, we've done this show for 100 episodes, so that's a landmark.
Yeah.
And it's the first time hitting 100 on a show, so we got there. Well, we will get there next week, hopefully.
I think I've hit 100 on Many Monsters.
Oh, yeah, twice.
Twice. Oh, my
Two
God, am I in
separate
2? Oh, yeah. That's true.
So come back next week for episode 100 and the end of the Sawyer family and the legend of Leatherface.
Ooh.
And we might end next week with a little bit more of a surprise, but we got a lot more to come. If you want, you can go check out It's a Live Action, Mini Monsters, Playing with Bones, Celebrity Rap Sheet on Patreon at that's the thing, at the Horrorverse Network. If you want socials, It's a Live Pod. We also have Real Talk with the Doctor, that's on there as well. And you have Amy Rose on Twitch every Monday 10 to 12. That's Amy Rose 9, so check that out. And I think that's it for this week.
I think so.
We'll be back next week with more tales from the Horrorverse. See y'all then. Same live time, same Horrorverse channel. Okay, love you. Bye-bye.